An outing with Paddington was more likely than not to end up in some kind of disaster, and she wasn't sorry to be out of the way for a change. All the same, Mrs. Bird would have been hard put to find fault with the orderly procession which neared the park some while later, and even the policeman on point duty nodded approvingly when Mr. Gruber signalled that they wanted to cross the road. He at once held up the traffic with one hand and touched his helmet with the other when Paddington raised his hat as they went by. It had taken them quite a long time to reach the park, for there had been a great many shop windows to look in on the way, and Mr. Gruber had stopped several times in order to point out some interesting sights he didn't want them to miss. Although Paddington had been in a number of parks before, it was the first time in his life he had ever seen a really big one, and as Mr. Gruber led the way through the big iron gates, he decided he was going to enjoy himself. Apart from the grass and trees, there were fountains, swings, deck chairs, and in the distance he could even see a lake shimmering in the afternoon sun. In fact, there was so much to see he had to blink several times in order to make sure he was still in London. Mr. Gruber beamed with pleasure at the look on Paddington's face. "It might be an idea to go and sit by the lake first of all, Mr. Brown," he said. "Then you can dip your paws in the water to cool off while we have our sandwiches." "Thank you very much, Mr. Gruber," said Paddington gratefully. The hot pavements always made his feet tired, and the thought of being able to cool them and have a marmalade sandwich at the same time seemed a very good idea. For the next few minutes, Mr. Gruber's party was very quiet indeed, and the only sound, apart from the distant roar of the traffic, was an occasional splash as Paddington dipped his paws in the water, and the clink of a marmalade jar as he made some extra sandwiches to be on the safe side. When they had finished their picnic, Mr. Gruber led the way towards a small enclosure where the swings and slides were kept, and he stood back while Paddington, Jonathan, and Judy hurried inside to see what they could find. Paddington in particular was very keen on slides, and he was anxious to test a large one which he had seen from a distance. It was when the excitement was at its height that Mr. Gruber suddenly cupped one hand to his ear and called for quiet. "I do believe there's a band playing somewhere," he said. Sure enough, as the others listened, they could definitely hear strains of music floating across the park. It seemed to be coming from behind a clump of trees, and as Mr. Gruber led the way across the park, it gradually got louder and louder. Then, as they rounded a corner, another large enclosure came into view. At one end of it, there was a bandstand, and in front of that there were rows and rows of seats filled with people listening to the music. Mr. Gruber pointed excitedly at the bandstand. "We're in luck, Mr. Brown," he exclaimed. "It's the Guards." While Mr. Gruber went on to explain that the Guards were a very famous regiment of soldiers who kept watch over Buckingham Palace and other important places, Paddington peered through the fence at the men on the platform. They all wore brightly coloured uniforms with very tall black hats made of fur, and their instruments were so highly polished they sparkled in the sun like balls of fire. "It's a good many years since I went to a band concert in the park, Mr. Brown," said Mr. Gruber. "I've never been to one, Mr. Gruber," said Paddington. "That settles it then," replied Mr. Gruber. And as the item came to an end and the audience applauded, he led the way to the entrance and asked for 4 5-pence tickets. They just managed to squeeze themselves into 4 seats near the back before the conductor, a very imposing man with a large moustache, raised his baton for the next item. Paddington settled himself comfortably in his seat. They had done so much walking that day he wasn't at all sorry to be able to sit down and rest his paws for a while, and he applauded dutifully and cheered several times when, with a flourish, the conductor at last brought the music to an end and turned to salute the audience. Judy nudged Paddington. "You can see what they're going to play next," she whispered, pointing towards the bandstand. "It's written on that board up there." Paddington took out his opera glasses and leaned out into the aisle as he peered at the board with interest. There were several items called selections, which he didn't immediately recognize. These were followed by a number of regimental marches, one of which had just been played. After that came another selection from something called a surprise symphony, which sounded very good value. But it was as he peered at the last item that a strange expression suddenly came over